Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rachak Wadash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Isaiah, the 7th chapter. And, as we go into this chapter, right, pretty much deal with Isaiah's message, right, first to Ahab, and then the broader message as to the fate that would come upon Israel. So this is Isaiah chapter 7, verse 1. And it came to pass in the days of Ahaz, so like I think I said Ahab, but I meant Ahaz or Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah. Now, when we went into Isaiah the 6th chapter, we saw that this vision that Isaiah saw was in the year, as it says, that Uzziah died. So basically, right around this time, I believe Jotham, at least in the time of Isaiah 6, when he received that vision, Jotham was the king or the ruler at the time. And after Jotham came Ahaz, all right, or Ahaz, which he wasn't a good king anyway, right? He did a lot of wickedness, which we went into in the book of Kings and Chronicles. So it says here, in the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, that Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it. Okay, so they basically came up against Jerusalem, but the plans that they had, that they were trying to execute in doing so, the Lord basically had it not happen. Now, this isn't to say that they weren't able to cause damage to Jerusalem or to Judah. They did, but their ultimate plan, as we will read on down, did not come to fruition. Now, a quick precept for this is in 2 Kings, the 15th chapter, right, as it reads in verse 37. Actually, let me start at 36. It says, "Now the rest of the acts of Jotham and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah?" So this is usually what you'll see at the end of Jotham's reign. As it says, "In those days, the Lord Yahweh began to send against Judah Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah," and Pekah being the king at the time of the northern kingdom, and Rezin being the king of Syria. "And Jotham slept with his fathers, and was buried with his fathers in the city of David his father, and Ahaz his son reigned in his stead." So around this time, you had what we just read here in Isaiah 7 and 1. "And it was told the house of David, saying, Syria is confederate with Ephraim." So basically, when you deal with the way messages traveled, right, you would have a messenger that would come to seek an audience with the king or the king's court to bring this message here, right? So you can imagine when it says here the house of David, word basically got to Ahab and the royal household of this news here to say that Syria and Ephraim were basically allied, and his heart was moved, and the heart of his people as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. So in other words, he became afraid. Okay, when you go into that word moved, as we already know, the word heart here means his mind, right? So he basically, let's see, heart here. So as you see here, it says to quiver, totter, shake, reel, stagger, to tremble. Okay, so when he heard that, damn, the Syrians allied with the northern kingdom and they're planning to come, basically against us, they were afraid, right? Both Ahaz and the rest of the people of Judah. It says here, as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind, right? So it's similar if you visualize it, how when it's very windy, or maybe say during a storm, you have the wind that basically pushes and blows the trees every which way. That's how this news moved their hearts, right? It made them fearful and afraid. Verse 3, Then said the Lord unto Isaiah, Go forth now to meet Ahaz, thou and Shear-Jashub thy son. Now, what's interesting about this, right? Something I found interesting when reading this was when you go into the meaning of the name of Isaiah's son, I believe it's let's see, Shawab. Yeah. You have here Sha'ar Yashawab, which means a remnant shall return, right? A symbolic name for the son of Isaiah the prophet. And when you it comes from the root words Shawab and Sha'ar, right? And the root word Sha'ar here has a remnant, residue, remainder. And I believe the word Shawab means to return, right? To turn back, to return. So it's interesting that the Lord, with the meaning of Isaiah's son's name, he instructed Isaiah to go with his son to go and deliver this message to Ahaz. So it says here, Go forth and meet Ahaz, thou and Shear-Jashub thy son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool in the highway. And the conduit here is basically like aqueduct, almost like that basically transports a path that transports water, probably from a larger body of water, maybe a river or upstream, downstream somewhere, to, as it says here, the upper pool, in the highway of the fuller's field. Okay, so and when you actually look up here, the fuller's field, like basically what a fuller does is they prepare or clean or whiten, clothes more often, like freshly made ones from wool. And the job of a fuller is not an easy one. So I pulled up here definition of fuller from the Encyclopedia of the Bible, and we have here fuller, which before that, let me actually look into the word because I believe they reference it meaning trample. But let's take a look and see what's that in the Hebrew. So the fuller, kabas. Well, here it just says to wash, to be washed. Okay, all right, see, treader. All right, and that's where they get that from, because as we'll read here, it says here to trample or tread, one who cleans, shrinks, and thickens newly shorn wool or cloth. And shorn, like when you shear sheep, you basically shave off the wool. And so shorn wool is that wool that you get off of the body of the sheep, or cloth. Also, in ancient times, the fuller often dyed cloth. The root of the Hebrew word meaning to tread suggests what was chiefly involved in the fuller's art. Before material could be used for a garment, it was necessary first to free it from the oily and gummy substances that adhered to the raw fiber. So when you have your garment, the way it feels when you wear it, right, it's different than the raw material, right? When you get that wool and then you spin, right, and create that like thread-like substance and use it to like weave and actually make the cloth or make the garment, then you have to, the fuller then takes it from there to make it transform the material to that where it's nice, smooth, stable, and all of that, and wearable. So it says here, this was done by first washing the material with some cleansing substance like white clay, putrid urine, or nitre, which was made from the ashes of certain plants that grew in Egypt. And yes, that's right. Sometimes they would use urine, as disgusting as that is, but hey, such was the nature of the job. Soap was and because, well, as we'll read here, it will tell us, soap was unknown in ancient times, according to them, but I think they had some equivalent of it. The material was then washed free from the alkali by many changes of clean water or by boys treading on it in a running stream. So the main job here would be that they would tread, constantly stomp and stomp and stomp and stomp and stomp and stomp on this material, okay, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again for hours. After that, it was placed in the sun to dry and bleach. Because of the odors given forth in the process of fulling, the fuller's shop was usually outside the city. And that's why we have a reference here to the fuller's field. Okay, so it wasn't an easy job, but just a bit of context on that as to what a fuller is, what they do, and then the nature of their work. So, and this is like their almost like a version of their ancient world laundromat. So be grateful if you have one. Just throw your stuff in the machine and it does it for you. Verse 4, and say unto him. So going back to the context, the Lord tells Isaiah, the Lord sees the fear that's in Ahaz and, the house of David. So he sends Isaiah to say, go and give him this message here. Verse 4, and say unto him, take heed and be quiet. Fear not, neither be faint-hearted. So don't relax, calm down. Don't stress because of because of Rezin and Pekah. So as it says here, neither be faint-hearted for the two tails of these smoking firebrands, for the fierce anger of Rezin with Syria and the son of Remaliah. Now, what is meant by the two tails of these smoking firebrands is a firebrand is like a burning wood. And I pulled up an image somewhere here. Yeah, smoking firebrand is like burnt wood. So I'm sure we've all seen this before, right? You have the wood that's in here. And if you look at these pieces of wood right here, what you see is as the fire burns it, right, it starts to look like this. And this is like the tail. When it says here, the two tails of the smoking firebrands is referring to this latter end right here, which is the weakest, right? In fact, sometimes it gets so weak that if you just blow on it with like strong enough air, it'll just break off and fall. Okay. And so the Lord is likening the alliance and the anger of Rezin and Remaliah to the weakest part of this burning wood, which was like in the ancient world, it's another way of saying like, don't even stress because these guys ain't, they ain't shit. They're nothing. They're like, they're like this weak ass wood that's pretty much burnt out. And that's the message that is being conveyed here. So that's why he's saying, don't stress, right? What I mean by the two tails is the fierce anger of Rezin with Syria and the son of Remaliah. Because Syria, Ephraim, and the son of Remaliah, which is Pekah, have taken evil counsel against thee, saying, let us go up against Judah and vex it. So their plan was to come against Judah, take over, right? And let us make a breach therein for us. So get a way in there and set a king in the midst of it, even the son of Tabiel. So their plan was with their alliance, they would take down Judah, set up a puppet ruler in there, and then have that control. And that puppet ruler they wanted to set up was an individual named Tabiel, whoever he was. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, it shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass. So Isaiah is telling Ahaz, look, and then his people, right? Don't even stress. The Lord said, these guys over here, yes, they're saying this and that and this, that, and the third, but they can't do anything. Okay. And so don't even stress it. Their plan is not gonna come to pass. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin. And when you read this, I think it's a bit clearer in the NLT. All right, it says, for Syria is no stronger than its capital, Damascus, and Damascus is no stronger than its king, Rezin. Right? So don't even stress. They're only as strong as their ruler. And I'm telling you that their rulers are like these smoking firebrands. And within 65 years, which is 65 years, shall Ephraim be broken, that it be not a people. And when you look at the timelines, I believe around this time of Ahaz basically just coming on the scene and getting this message, I think they placed this somewhere around like 732 BC. And we know that historically, right, if we look up here, siege of Samaria. think that ended around 720. Let's see if they tell us when this, okay, Siege of Samaria. Okay, there we go. So right around 732, as they have it here, conquest. Well, that's the conquest, but we're looking for the siege. I believe the siege was about 3 years. So that's give or take 723-ish BC to about 720 BC, I believe is when the Northern Kingdom was taken down, right? It says here, yeah, let me read this. It says the remainder of the Northern Kingdom of Israel continued to exist within the reduced territory as an independent kingdom until around 720 BC, when it was again invaded by Assyria and more of the population was deported. Not all of Israel's populace was deported by the Assyrians. During the 3-year siege of Samaria in the territory of Ephraim by the Assyrians, Shalmaneser V died, right, because he was the one who started the siege, and was succeeded by Sargon II, who himself records the capture of that city. So, quote unquote, Samaria I captured 27,280 men who dwelt in it, I carried away into Assyria. Thus, around 720 BC, after 2 centuries, the Northern Kingdom came to an end. So that's the main point right there. So when you go back to what Isaiah is saying here, this within 65 years, which is about 65 years, it doesn't mean that 65 years later is when this would take place, where, as it says, Ephraim would be broken, that it be not a people. But what he's saying is within, right? Ephraim is going to go down within the next 65 years at some point, right? That's like the time frame he gave him. And that being broken and basically to where it's not a people, as we just went into, was when they got overtaken by the Assyrians and reduced basically to nothing, and then had heathens put into their land. Verse 9, and the head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is Remaliah's son. Once again, Pekah. And the same verbiage as above, right? Like Ephraim is only pretty much as strong as its capital, which is Samaria, and that's really ruled by Pekah, right? If ye will not believe, surely ye shall not be established. So Isaiah is telling Ahaz, look, the Lord says, don't worry about these guys. You're going to be fine. But you have to believe in the Lord. You have to have faith in him that he's gonna strengthen you. Now, though Ahaz was a wicked king, this was still done because Ahaz was of the house of David, right? And the Lord said that he would always have one of the house of David to sit on the throne. So when you look at how the Lord dealt with the southern kingdom, it was a bit more, merciful, right? There were a lot more righteous kings in the southern kingdom, which that actually remained a dynasty. Okay, so they're actual sons, not like usurpers or any of those, but the actual sons of the kings were the ones who sat on the throne. So here, the Lord is giving Ahaz a chance here. And so Isaiah is telling him, look, the Lord says, just believe, and have faith, and you'll be good. Verse 10, moreover, the Lord spake again unto Ahaz, saying, so at another point in time, right, the Lord sent Isaiah to go give Ahaz another message. And this time he said, ask thee a sign of the Lord thy God. Ask it either in the depth or in the height above. So at this point in time, practically speaking, you can imagine what's happening, right? Isaiah is giving Ahaz the message, but Ahaz is like in his mind, he's likely still having either doubts or fear, right? And not trusting in the Lord. So the Lord sends Isaiah to go back to Ahaz and tell him, look, go whatever sign, right, you want for a confirmation, similar to what Gideon did, right? Go ahead and ask anything. When it says either in the depth or in the heights above, that's just to say, like, you can ask anything. Ask any sign you want, and I'll do it to prove to you that what I'm saying is what's going to happen. But Ahaz said, I will not ask. neither will I tempt the Lord. So here he is portraying himself as almost as being like pious in a way, right? Like, oh no, I don't want to tempt the Lord and whatnot. Verse 13, and he said, hear ye now, O house of David, is it a small thing for you to weary men? But will ye weary my God also? And let me read this in another translation. At least the wording might make a bit more sense here, right? So in the NLT, it says, then Isaiah said, listen well, you royal family of David. So at this point, you can probably imagine Isaiah's, he himself is getting a bit frustrated here. And it'll all make sense in a bit as to why Ahaz said no and why Isaiah is getting frustrated here, right? So he says here, listen well, you royal family of David. Isn't it enough to exhaust human patience? Must you exhaust the patience of my God as well? And the reason that he is saying this is because the Lord sent the message to tell Ahaz, stop stressing, you're going to be fine. And then he probably still is stressing. So the Lord sends him another message and say, hey, even better, I'll give you a sign. Go ahead, ask anything you want, and then I'll show you the proof of what I'm talking about. Then he says, no, it's fine. I don't, it's okay. I'm not even going to ask for a sign. So it's like, bro, what's your problem? Like you're looking for an excuse to not believe the words of the Lord. And what we also see when we read in the book of Kings and Chronicles is that Ahaz, behind the scenes, right, he ended up making an alliance with the Assyrians, right? He ended up seeking the help of the Assyrians in this case. So you can deduce that he's likely doing this because he's trying to put his trust in man. He's thinking, I would rather just make a deal with the Assyrians and they can help me out. And so rather than make myself guilty by requesting for a sign, and then you can come back and say, hey, I even showed you a sign and yet you didn't believe me, I would just say, no, I don't want to tempt the Lord. It's fine. Whatever happens, happens. So Isaiah is getting kind of frustrated here saying, you trying to test the Lord's patience or something. Verse 14, therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign, right? So he says, look, you don't want to ask for a sign. You know what? It's fine. The Lord is going to give you a sign himself. Behold, a virgin shall conceive. And this Isaiah 7:14, this sign, where it was a prophecy. And the word virgin here, because Isaiah chapter 7:14 is one of those chapters that people misuse a lot. They try to use this to, at least in misunderstanding the word virgin, to signify a woman that has never laid with a man before. But when we go into this word virgin here, right, it says here, a virgin, a young woman, right, of marriageable age, a maid or newly married, right? So, even better. Interesting. So it says here, there is no instance where it can be proved that Alma designates a young woman who is not, let me read this, who is not a virgin. The fact of virginity is obvious in Genesis 24:43, where Alma is used of one who is being sought as a bride of Isaac. Okay, so I guess the point, well, this is pretty much irrelevant here, but apparently from R. Laird Harris in this book over here, he's making the claim that there is no instance where you can prove the word Alma, which that's the word here, Ilama or Ilma, designates a young woman who is not a virgin, right? Or in other words, the definition here. So this person here is trying to say that the word is used in Genesis 24 to represent, when a woman, they were seeking a bride for Isaac, which was Rebecca. Obviously, she would be like a literal virgin. And so because this word is used there, then it signifies that the word means like an actual virgin who has never laid with a man before. But obviously, that's off here. In this case, when it says a young woman, it's referring to a when it says a virgin, it's not a woman who's never laid with a man before, because how are you going to get pregnant if you haven't laid with a man? And the reason this person said this is likely to support that whole immaculate conception doctrine. But in any case, even if the word Alma is used in Genesis 24 to represent a bride that is sought for Isaac, it would still be valid, because the bride that was being sought for Isaac would be a maid, right? Or would be a woman of marriageable age. So it doesn't necessarily have to mean that she was that because it's used in that context, the word suddenly means a woman who has never had sex before. Just wanted to make that point there. So when we go back to Isaiah 7 and 14, and Isaiah says to Ahaz, right, you don't want to ask for a sign, the Lord will give you a sign regardless. And then that sign here, which is a prophecy, is, behold, a virgin or a young woman shall conceive. So she's going to get pregnant and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel, right, which translates to God with us. And so this sign was a sign, really a prophecy about the Messiah, Yahushai, right? And how do we know that? When we go to the book of Matthew, chapter 1, it's referenced here, right? This is Matthew chapter 1, verse 18. Now the birth of Yahushai was on this wise, when as his mother Mary was espoused to Joseph, before they came together, she was found with child of the Holy Spirit. So in modern terms, she was promised to Joseph, right? Betrothed onto Joseph, but before the actual, say, day of the wedding or marriage, she was found with child. She was pregnant, right? So that would indicate that there were some activities going on. Then Joseph, her husband, being a just man and not willing to make her a public example, was minded to put her away privately. So because it would be a shameful thing to say, hey, how is she pregnant before the actual day where they both go into the chamber and yada yada. So he wanted to basically call it off, but like low key, so that she wouldn't be made a public example, to where everybody knows about it. But while he thought on these things, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a dream, saying, Joseph, thou son of David, fear not to take unto thee Mary thy wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. This doesn't mean she magically got pregnant and then the baby inside of her was put in there by the Holy Spirit. Verse 21, and she shall bring forth a son, right? Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and thou shalt call his name Yahushai. This Jesus here in the ancient Hebrew is Yahushai, right? Even in we know the angel never said Jesus, because the word J didn't even exist at the time. And the angel when the angel was speaking to Joseph, he would be speaking in Hebrew, because Joseph spoke Hebrew. Right? There's no record that says Joseph spoke Greek or any other language. So when the angel said this line to Joseph, what language would he have said it in? Hebrew. And what would he have said here? Because Jesus is not Hebrew, right? It's Yahushai, which is in English Joshua. For he shall save his people from their sins. Now all this was done, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, behold, a virgin shall be with child. Right? Going back to Isaiah 14, behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son. And they shall call his name Emmanuel, which being interpreted is God with us. So the sign that the Lord gave to Ahaz here, right, by the mouth of Isaiah, was a prophecy concerning the Messiah. Okay. So continuing in Isaiah 7 and 15, butter and honey shall he eat. And when you go into that word butter, it really goes into like curd, which is like coagulated milk. And back then, right, this was like, today you have baby food, right? They give you, unfortunately, they'll give these kids like formula and all of that, which is not healthy for them. But back then, you would breastfeed the child, and eventually they would, as they can eat more solid foods, then they would give them like that curd, honey and all of those things. So it says here, butter and honey shall he eat. Not your I can't believe it's not butter, right? Nobody's sitting there eating raw butter. That he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good. And what this means is basically he would be raised up like a regular child, right? Eating what they normally eat until the point where he is old enough to discern right and wrong. That's what it means by like knowing to refuse the good and evil, or knowing to refuse the evil and choose the good. So when you're a child at a certain age, you can't really tell the difference, right? But as you grow older, you get to a point where you are now wise enough to discern what's right and wrong. For before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land that thou abhorrest shall be forsaken of both her kings. So when you read from verse really around 13 to 16, the message here is, you didn't want to ask for a sign, then this is the sign the Lord is going to give you. There's going to come a point in time where you're going to have a woman who is going to bear a son, and they're going to call his name Emmanuel. By Emmanuel, it really means like that would be almost like the meaning, the essence of him, right? Not his literal name, because his name was Yahushua. Okay. Now that lady, that woman, which would bear this son, right? There would be a point in time where this would happen, and he would be raised up like a regular child, right? Being fed butter and honey, and then eventually he would grow to a point where he is able to discern right and wrong. Before we get to the point where this child is old enough to discern right and wrong, the land that thou abhorrest shall be forsaken of both her kings. And this is referring to Syria and Samaria, or Syria and Ephraim. Because remember, Isaiah is talking to Ahaz. And so when it says that thou abhorrest, it's talking about those that were putting fear into Ahaz's mind, which were Pekah, king of Israel, or Samaria or Ephraim, and Rezin, king of Syria. So Isaiah is saying here, before that point in which this prophecy gets fulfilled, these two lands would be forsaken of both her kings, meaning that there would be some destruction or judgment upon them, to where they're gonna be brought to a low and destitute state, right? Like a forsaken state, which we end up seeing happening anyway. Verse 17, the Lord Yahweh shall bring upon thee and upon thy people. So after this happens, right? After the northern kingdom gets theirs and Syria also gets theirs, now upon you, right? Verse 17, the Lord shall bring upon thee and upon thy people, which is to say Judah, and upon thy father's house, days that have not come since the day that Ephraim departed from Judah. And this was signifying the judgment or trouble the Lord would bring upon Judah that they haven't experienced since the point when Jeroboam revolted from, the house of Judah, right, where you had the split. And it says here, even the king of Assyria. So this was to symbolize when the Assyrians would also come against the southern kingdom, okay, against Judah. And we saw this happen when, right, a little bit during the reign of Ahaz, right? Because I think it's here in 2 Chronicles when, let me actually read it here. 2 Chronicles 28 and 19. For the Lord Yahweh brought Judah low because of Ahaz, king of Israel, for he made Judah naked and transgressed sore against the Lord. When it says here, king of Israel, is referring to Judah, right? So he made Judah naked, which means he caused them to commit iniquity, right? Naked doesn't mean physically naked, but spiritually, right? I believe it's in the book of Job or Psalms, or one of those chapters, or maybe Isaiah, that likens righteousness onto a robe or a garment that can cover you. So being naked would be to be without, or be going in the wicked ways. So Ahaz made Judah naked by leading them into transgressions, mainly in idolatry, and transgressed sore against the Lord. And Tiglath-Pileser, or Tiglath-Pilneser, as it's worded here, king of Assyria, came unto him and distressed him, but strengthened him not. And this was the start of it. But then, as we see as time goes on, right, you had different instances of the Assyrians coming against Judah. One example of it also was when Sennacherib, right, came, even though the Lord had mercy on them. So going back to Isaiah chapter 7, verse continuing 18 now. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord Yahweh shall hiss for the fly that is in the uttermost parts of the rivers of Egypt, and for the bee that is in the land of Assyria. So when it says here to like hiss for the fly, no, hissing, right? I think we read that in the previous chapter as well. It's like he's going to signal to call. And the fly is just, Egypt is being likened onto a fly and Assyria onto a bee, right? I mean, they're nations of people, but they are here being metaphorically represented as like, a fly and a bee, right? One, because they're heathens, but two, because it's sort of like this poetic way that Isaiah is delivering this message. So as it says here, right, in essence, the Lord is going to bring against you the Egyptians, right, and the Assyrians, and they shall come and shall rest, all of them, in the desolate valleys and in the holes of the rocks, and upon all thorns and upon all bushes, right? To say basically, just like if you had flies or bees invade your land, they would fill up everywhere, go into the valleys, the rocks, the bushes, the thorns. That was basically to symbolize that they would invade your land. Verse 20, in the same day shall the Lord shave with a razor that is hired, namely by them beyond the river, by the king of Assyria, the head and the hair of the feet, and it shall also consume the beard. And so he's saying here, I'm going to bring them against you. They're going to invade your land, right? And the Lord is also going to hire a razor. And that razor here, it's the Assyrians, but he is likening them onto a razor that the Lord is going to use to shave your head and the hair of your feet. The hair of your feet is a euphemism for your pubic hairs. All right, if you look up here, hair of your feet, euphemism. It says here the hair of the feet is a euphemism for the pubic hair. Some modern translations wrongly have hair of the legs instead of hair of the feet and miss the euphemism. So a euphemism is like a saying, like that means something else. So going back to Isaiah 7 and 20, the message here is the Lord is going to he's going to bring the Assyrians against you. And the analogy here is likened onto them being a razor that the Lord is going to use to shave your head and shave your pubic hairs and consume, right, shave your beard as well. Now, when you look into why Isaiah words it this way, right, what is the significance in likening them onto a razor that's shaving your hair, right? Back in the ancient world, shaving of your hair, especially your beard, was a shameful thing, right? It was a very humiliating thing that would happen if somebody shaved your beard, which is why when King David's men, right, the men he sent, I believe, unto the Ammonites for peace, came back with their beard shaved, he basically sent them away to go and wait until their beard grew back, and then they can come back amongst the people. So this would represent the Assyrians, right? They would invade the land. They would basically make bare the land by taking away all the gold, the silver, the resources, all right, and leaving you with barely anything, but also almost like a public humiliation of Judah by the Assyrians, by making them subject onto them, okay? And that's that visual of like having their head and their hair and all of that shaved. It's Slakia for the background noise. They cut in some grass and whatnot. So it says here, and it shall come to pass in that day that a man shall nourish a young cow and 2 sheep. And when for some of these verses, I'll pull up the NLT for the wording. But it says here, in that day, a farmer will be fortunate to have a cow and 2 sheep or goats left, because there would be barely anything left, right? So a cow or a sheep here and there is all they would have, and they would take care of that and nourish it, so they can then, as it leads into the subsequent verses, be able to survive off of it. Verse 22, and it shall come to pass for the abundance of milk that they shall give, he shall eat butter, for butter and honey shall everyone eat that is left in the land. So the remnants, right, that are in this region, this is basically what they're gonna is gonna become like their main staple for lack of food, right? So as where you would usually eat, like, curd and honey and or butter and honey as, like, every so often, now this would become like the main go-to food, because this is kind of like all you have. Now, when you look into was it butter, right? Let's look into that word butter. There you go. So the reason I keep referring to it as curd is because that's it right there, and that's coagulated milk. That's why it's referring to it coming from the cow. And if we pull this up in the NLT, right, it says here, nevertheless, there will be enough milk for everyone, because so few people will be left in the land. They will eat their fill of yogurt and honey. Now, keep in mind, it did mention the Assyrians, right? And we know historically that the Assyrians, like their main target, right, in the when we go around this time, was the northern kingdom, because they're the ones who were really taken out of the land. But the southern kingdom also suffered at the hand of the Assyrians, because the Assyrians were the world superpower at the time. So they still had jurisdiction of that region. And what this symbolizes is not like a literal example, but it was to symbolize that they would feed off of you, right? You would have to be subject onto them and be pressed for resources. And so the image that is being painted here is like one who has to take care of this cow, and now this is all they're eating, pretty much, right? It's like curd and honey as like their main staple, for lack of diverse resources that they can easily access. Verse 23, and it shall come to pass in that day that every place shall be, that every place shall be where there were 1,000 vines at 1,000 silverlings, it shall even be briars and thorns. Okay, which is to say that, those nice areas that were very expensive are now going to be filled with briars and thorns. And we see that eventually this ended up happening, right? Because even after the Assyrians went down, you had the Babylonians, which came up because they took down the Assyrians, and they ended up taking Judah out of their land and leaving that land. I think it's either in Daniel or in Jeremiah, it mentions the land shall enjoy her Sabbaths, right? So there were just a remnant of people left in the land. And you had basically the land is now starting to grow uncultivated, right? That's where you have your like briars and thorns, and places start to look uninhabitable. It says here, verse 24, with arrows and with bows shall men come thither, because all the land shall become briars and thorns. And so, let me see, I think it's also, this is a good one. NLT, the entire land will become a vast expanse of briars and thorns, a hunting ground overrun by wildlife, right? Because, for example, if you've ever played the game The Last of Us, or you've ever watched, what's that? I Am Legend. You notice how there are certain scenes where, after people not dwelling even in the cities for so long, it starts to grow, like trees and stuff starts to grow in the buildings and all around the walls and everything. And before you know it, you going into like, if you went into like a Manhattan a building today, a Manhattan office today, you're just walking up in there. You got lights, you got, automatic doors, revolving doors, and all of that. Now, say all hell breaks loose and nobody's dwelling there for months, and trees are growing in, and you know, all of those things. If you were to go into that same building at that time, you would probably have a weapon with you, because you'd hear sounds. There would probably be some creatures that are living up in there that you're not expecting. All right. So you can think of a visual like that, to where here now the land is so barren that coming in here, you'd come with like bows and arrows, as we read in the NLT, because it'd be like a hunting ground almost, right? Overrun with wildlife, as it said. Verse 25, and on all hills that shall be digged with the mattock, which is like a plow, the plowshare, I think that's what it is. There shall not come thither the fear of briars and thorns, but it shall be for the sending forth of oxen and for the treading of lesser cattle. Which is to say that on the places where it was, harvestable, right, or ideal for like planting and so on, people are barely going to go there because it's going to be filled with briars and thorns, right? And instead, it'll be a place where you have oxen and, a few cattle that are treading and, roaming about over there. Right, and that brings us to the end of the book of Isaiah, the 7th chapter. So as we see in this chapter, it basically begins with, the fear that is instilled in Ahaz because of the alliance of the northern kingdom and Syria, for which Isaiah comes and tries to, strengthen him in the Lord, but his faithlessness and his disobedience ends up leading to the Lord giving him a sign, right, which would signify upcoming judgment against the northern kingdom, Syria, and also even the southern kingdom. So with that, Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.